name's Dennis Thies.
Okay.
Okay. I was born and raised in a little town in South Dakota called Canton. Graduated from Canton High School, 1957. And I had several opportunities to go to college, but I was too smart to go to college. I knew I didn't need it, so I
Yeah.
didn't go, see.
Okay.
I think you should say he came from a large family.
I was born into a family that I had 8 brothers and sisters.
Oh, wow.
One that was born 2 years after he died. So there was 8 of us. I was the oldest. And the size of Canton was about 2,500 people.
So fairly small.
Well, it was at that time it was
Right.
the 16th largest in the state of South
wow.
Dakota. And I was into athletics. Played.
What sports did you play?
Well, we were only, the school, high school only had 3.
Oh.
Football, basketball, and track. And I was in all of them.
You were in all of them?
Yeah. And there you started in the 7th grade, and they had no different for junior high, high. I mean, if you wanted to play football, you went out for the varsity. And if you didn't make the varsity, you didn't play. But I was good enough that I lettered my 7th grade, my 8th grade, my 9th grade year. I broke my neck in basketball, and that basically ended my athletic career. And since I wasn't doing athletics anymore, I kind of became not too good of student,
Right.
not too good of a kid. Ended up with a police record.
Don't say that, you really didn't have a police record.
Sure did.
Yeah, what'd you do?
Huh?
What did you do that you had a police record?
In those days where we used to go, everything was, we had outhouses, instead of indoor plumbing, and we used to go around tipping outhouses.
Yeah, you did that, but
Or
all they
moving
did
them
was
so people
slap
would fall
you.
in them,
Hey Graham, did I tell you I got accepted to college?
No, which one?
University of Maine, in Orono University.
And,
Good.
but really what saved me was I had a buddy, this buddy and I, his family had a history of being in the Navy. My family had no history of being in any branch of the service. So we used to get into some polite discussions on, I convinced him that we should join the Air Force. He tried to convince me to join the Navy. That was more just to kill time, except one Sunday. We were driving around, nothing to do, drinking beer, and he says,
Okay.
let's join the Navy. Figuring we'd get into a discussion, and I says, okay, let's join the Navy. He says, okay.
So you joined the Navy, how old were you?
I was 18.
18.
Yeah. My birthday was in June, so we graduated from high school in the middle of May. And then I had no job. We were just bumming around Canton, getting in trouble. And he, like I say, that's Sunday, says, let's join the Navy. And I says, okay. He says, well, I'll pick you up tomorrow morning. And I didn't even think any more about it until next morning. My mother's hollering, Dennis, Ben's here. He says, you guys are going to Sioux Falls. Then it dawned on me, so we drove to Sioux Falls, walked into the Navy office. They says, "What can we do for you?" And we says, "We're gonna enlist." So we ended up enlisting.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Ben had a federal police record, federal
Right.
criminal record. He borrowed somebody's ID card one time to, see, in South Dakota, you could drink beer at 18,
Right.
at that, in those days.
Mm-hmm.
But if you wanted to buy hard liquor, you had to be 21.
Yeah.
And since they didn't require a driver's license, you didn't have that as any ID. What you had to have was a federal
Right.
ID. And he borrowed it and got caught, and it was a federal offense. So it took him, this was in September when we went to join, it took him from September to the end of November to clear him. And so it was the end of November that we were shipped out,
Mm-hmm. And where were you? Were you shipped out to?
San Diego.
San Diego.
They were gonna send us, from South Dakota, they sent everybody, their normal place was the Great Lakes
Mm-hmm.
Naval Training Center,
Right.
or in Chicago. But we didn't want any part of any more winter.
Right.
The Air Force, that was one thing, was in San Antonio, Texas.
Oh, yeah.
And then, of course, the Navy had another boot camp, was down in San Diego.
Truck up
Mhm.
there.
So that's why we wanted to go to San Diego. And we told them if they didn't send us to San Diego, we were gonna go across the hall and join the Air Force. And so they sent us to San Diego. And came down from San Diego, I went to boot camp there for 13 weeks. We came back in February for a little bit of leave. And from there, I went on to, an interesting part was that when I was in boot camp, they asked who wanted, and had a desire maybe to go to become a pilot. And I was one of, there was 6 of us that said we would go. And I passed you had to pass 4 written exams, and then you had to pass 4 oral exams. I passed all 4 of the written exams,
Right.
passed the first 3 oral exams, and then they found out in one of my written entry tests to the Navy, had nothing to do with this, I scored 6 points too low to meet the requirements to even have been eligible in the beginning. So that eliminated me from going any further.
Right.
They said, when you get to your next duty station, see if they will retest you, so you can get your score up. From San Diego, I went to Norman, Oklahoma. I was in school down there for 6 weeks. From Norman, Oklahoma, I went to Memphis, Tennessee, where I was for 9 months. And at both of those places, nobody wanted to even talk to me about retesting.
Right.
So my becoming a pilot was lost. Although I did get put into naval aviation.
So what did you do in that, in the naval aviation?
I was what they called an aviation fire control technician. And when I was in Memphis, when I got done with school, I was picked to become a nuclear weapons specialist.
Oh, wow.
And I got held over there for a month. I had to have a top secret clearance.
Wow.
So I got held over while I did some research on my family. Everybody passed, I got my top secret clearance. And from there, I went to San Diego, back to San Diego, assigned to a squadron who flew a particular type of aircraft that delivered atomic bombs.
Oh, wow.
My job was to see that they got mounted on the aircraft correctly, see that they got armed,
Right.
and to see that, depending upon what the target was gonna be, that all of the right settings got put into the bomb and to coordinate with settings to the aircraft.
Wow.
And then I had to take care of the equipment, the maintenance of the equipment. That was,
So you had a very important job.
yeah, I had a good one. And fortunately, we didn't deliver any atomic bombs, but we did a lot of practicing in a base that was about 75 miles east of San Diego, a place called El Centro, California. And that was interesting. We'd have pilots, it was one of the things to deliver them was they had to fly low. And when I say low, it'd be 40, 50 feet above the ground. And the way they delivered them, they come up and they make a flyover like that.
Oh, wow.
And actually what they called it, throw the bomb, not drop it.
Oh.
And they'd come back with creases in the bottom of the fake bomb and all that good stuff because they hit a telephone pole or something like that.
Yeah.
We had one pilot, he missed it so far that he threw it through a farmer's barn, through the roof of the farmer's barn. So it was interesting. And then I went back to San Diego and we were assigned to the aircraft carrier, the Shangri-La. And we made a cruise to the Pacific.
So what country were you in exactly?
Well, we stopped in Hawaii for a month.
Right.
And then from there we went on to Okinawa. So we had visited Okinawa a couple times. We
Right.
visited Manila in the Philippines once for 4 or 5 days. We went to Hong Kong. We were actually assigned out of a place called Yokosuka, Japan. So I spent a lot of time there. When we got in, the ship got into Yokosuka, we that were in the aircraft division part of it, we went on to a base, which I forget what was the name of it now, but it was inland. It was a naval Air Force base.
So how did you spend your time in these places? Did you get to go and just go on the land and stuff and visit around? How did you spend the time in these places that you visited?
We would, as being one who just had to deliver a nuclear weapons, of
Right.
course, my job did not really get me too involved in the day-to-day things, so I had
Right.
a lot of free time. And
Yeah.
what we did was, on Liberty, and we get a chance to go out, and a lot of the time was spent as most people think a Navy guy is in a bar, drinking and that good stuff. But we did spend time visiting, the different things in that part of whether it was Japan or whether it was Hong Kong or the Philippines. It was very interesting. I took 2 weeks leave when I was in Japan, climbed to the top of Mount Fuji.
Oh, wow.
Met a young lady over there. And when we came back to the States, my intent was, well, we were supposed to go back there anyway.
Right.
We go back to San Diego, we was gonna be there for 6 months and then go back to Japan or back to the
Right.
Asia. I didn't get back because I got home, went home on a couple weeks leave. Got in there, got in a car accident.
Oh.
Had a compound impact fracture of my femur.
Oh, that's not good.
And so I was in the VA hospital there in Sioux Falls for several weeks, and then they shipped me to the Great Lakes Naval Hospital.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how I got to the East Coast.
Oh.
After the hospital got done with me
Right.
there, they sent me to Norfolk, Virginia, where I had to go through a 6-month evaluation to see if I was still gonna be fit. They found me fit.
Mm-hmm.
Got signed to, they were building a new air group to take over when the Kitty Hawk, USS Kitty Hawk aircraft carrier got out of they were just building it. When it got done, we were supposed to get on the Kitty Hawk and take that to the West Coast. And then that sent me down to Key West, Florida for several weeks training. And then I was sent to Jacksonville, Florida, where I was stationed. And that's, down in Key West is where I met, just a little background, when I was in
Right.
Memphis, I met Connie's brother.
Oh.
But when we got done down there, he got shipped to the East Coast when I went to San Diego. And then when I got down to Key West to go to school, I walked into the classroom and there he was. We ended up getting back together again.
Oh, cool.
And that's how I ended up here in Maine.
Oh, wow.
They were living in Connecticut at the time. And he invited me up. The ship was pulling into, not the Kitty Hawk, but this was the Intrepid,
Right.
was pulling into New York City for weeks. We had midshipmen aboard, and we were pulling in there for a week's leave. And her brother invited me up to Connecticut. He says, "Why don't you come up?" He says. I says, "Are you kidding me?" I says, "Here I am, a young kid out of South Dakota in New York City for 4 days is what it
Right.
was." I says, "I'm gonna spend my 4 days in New York City." I got off the ship at 3 that afternoon. 7 o'clock that evening, I was back on board. I'd had my fill in New York City. And asked if the invitation to Connecticut was still open.
Right.
And went up to Connecticut with him. Met his family up there,
Right.
some other people. Then when I went back in, from there, ended up making a cruise to the Mediterranean.
Oh.
So that got me the opportunity to see Spain,
Oh.
France, Italy, Greece, a lot of the coast around there.
It must have been great to experience all of those different places that you get to go.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
It was, for a kid born and raised in South Dakota, never been out of the state, and to have the opportunity to see the world like that.
It's very cool.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for your time and talking about all of this.
Is there any more questions you have you want to?
I think this sums it up. Thank you so much.
Yeah. No.